Hi folks, Derek Jones here, EOS Property Group. Just a little bit of a brief overview on the sorts of things that EOS does, and maybe just a little comments to get you thinking a little bit about your own future. So let's just imagine what will happen if you do nothing in terms of providing for your own future. And look, it's fair to say there are a lot of people in our society that, as the picture suggests, have got their head in the sand. Look, typically most of us have a life expectancy of about 80 years. In reality, it's slightly more than that. Now that means if we do rough maths, that means we're going to be on this earth for about 44,000 weeks. Now I put those numbers up there for you like that because a lot of us, I'm sure, sit back and think, well, 80 years is a long time. However, certainly when I had this numbers presented to me and my life suddenly is only going to be 4,000 weeks long, I put a little bit of a impetus, if you like, in some of the direction and things that I was doing. Now, of that 4,000 weeks that we're going to be living on this particular planet, about 1,000 of those we use up until the age of 20, and that's basically taken up as a toddler, primary school, high school, and maybe university. So there goes a quarter of your life. We've then got about 2,000 weeks at work, and then if we do, and we leave work at the age of 60 and we fall off the perch at the age of 80, that gives us about 1,000 weeks in retirement. So that means that for every 2 weeks at work, we actually need to also be putting to one side or making facility for 1 week in retirement. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio between working life and retirement life. And when you start to put things in that sort of perspective, it makes it pretty clear that we really do need to do something for our own future. So therefore a lot of people turn to property, and the reason they do that, look, it's relatively low risk. We know that. Its long-term stability is without question. Over 30 years, the average growth rate, median prices across the country has been about 8.5% to 9%. Okay, so it's long-term. Banks love it. They'll give you a fair swag of money as a proportion of the purchase price to actually enable you to get into property. You can get away with as little as about 5%. We know about tax savings and we know that it's got a relatively reliable, regular income. But the beauty is it's a good asset class and it compounds over time. So that's why a lot of people are turning to property. But it's not just any old property, and this is where EOS really hits the mark, if you like, in terms of looking after people. There are those people out there who are capital growth investors. They're the negative gearing team. Unfortunately, if you just negatively gear a property portfolio, it doesn't take long before you hit a bank servicing wall, or you find that all of your overtime, after hours work, that sort of stuff is going into sustaining a property portfolio. Having some capital growth property is good, but what we advocate is a balanced approach. So there's also the cash flow side of things. They're the people that think that property should pay for all the bills. Unfortunately, those properties don't tend to grow as much. So if you just so that doesn't work either, just in its entirety and by itself. And then EOS has also got some advanced strategies, and one of these is our armchair development group, and that's an absolutely exciting concept, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So what we try and do is, rather than just a one-size-fits-all model, it's about a tailor-made approach. So each and every one of us is different, so we need to work out which strategy suits you, your goals, your lifestyle, your plans, your timelines, all those sort of things. That's what we do at EOS. And how do we do that? Look, we sit down and have a preliminary discussion. We then sit down and work with you, and we work up a strategy that you're comfortable with, you understand, you can commit to. Then we sit down and have a chat with a broker and work out what sort of borrowing capacity, what sort of funding levels have you got up your sleeve as a resource. Then we go through the property selection process. Then we help you with finding solicitors, tenants, depreciation reports, going back liaison between the broker. So we actually hold your hand throughout that process of investing. And then the really important part, because property is a really long-term direction, we sit with you each and every year on an ongoing review process. So every 12 months, review, let's see where you're up to, let's see where you're going, can you still get there, do we need to tweak what you're doing, is everything in order, can you stay on track? And that's an absolutely incredibly valuable and important part of the process that EOS does with you. Now let's go back one and look at a possible strategy, okay? And these are real numbers, folks. These are properties we've seen or we've had on a stock list or about June this year. Let's buy a property in Perth, capital growth, okay? Long-term capital growth in Perth is about 8.5%. So that means a $450,000 property is going to grow by increase in value on average by about $38,000 per year. But to hold that property, it's also going to cost you $10,000 in cash flow. Right? So it's a good growth, but it costs you. Over the other side of the equation, we can also, and we've got these properties too, by the way, we've also got cash flow properties. Now, their growth is questionable because of their locality, but this particular property is actually going to give you $10,000 per year. So you put the two together and you've got $1 million portfolio, and it's costing you costing you nothing, as you can see from these figures. But then you might be a really advanced and sophisticated investor and might be prepared to get into our armchair development program. Now, this basically means that you, instead of the developer getting the profits, you get the profits, and the numbers we're looking at, property in Bassendean, cost you $360, valued at $450. It's going to cost you about $7,000 in cash flow after purchase. But all of a sudden you can see you've got a very well-rounded portfolio. You've got one here in capital growth, which has got lots of growth, costs you a bit to hold. One over here in cash flow, which has got good cash flow but questionable growth. And then you can kickstart your journey even in a flat market like the one we've got, and you get an instant capital growth, instant equity gain of $90,000. So that's what we do at EOS, is work out which of these properties and strategies are best suited for you. So, because what we're on about is helping you to build your future, but in a manner that's simple. In other words, we do a lot of the work for you. It's very safe, and it's also very successful. Now, if you want some more information, jump on the web, suss us out, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, those sort of things. Bang us an email, info@eosproperty.com.au, or if you're one of those people that still uses a phone, give us a ring. Cheers.